Now getting back to the early performing thing, I would go to an audition, and chances are I would be eliminated because of my height, but there were times that didn't make any difference. And I can think of one time in which I was one boy with 12 girls, and we performed in nightclubs. And maybe that's not what I really wanted to do, but again, paid the rent.
Well, you were dancing, you weren't waiting tables or
That's right. And then I worked with Irene Hawthorne's concert company. Irene Hawthorne was the ballerina of Metropolitan Opera at the time, and so her name got us bookings that we couldn't have had otherwise. Mm-hmm. And then when I returned from there, I got a job. I got the job with being this one boy with 12 girls dancing at the Beverly Hills Country Club in Newport, Kentucky, which recently burned down about 10 or 15 years ago, which a lot of people were trapped inside. Very unpleasant thought, but I was there for some time. Then I came back to New York and immediately got with the Pittsburgh Civic Light Opera. And through them, I got to work with some of the biggest stars. I worked with Jeanette MacDonald. I worked with Andrei Glebsky, Maria Tallchief, Jack Cassidy, who was a much nicer person than what his persona on television. And
what were you in with Jeanette MacDonald?
Bittersweet.
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 And that was, you said Pittsburgh Opera, but was that in
Civic
New York?
Light.
Civic.
It was in.
It was produced in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I worked with Patrice Mansell in Rosemary and also in Merry Widow.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was very exciting. One of the tales I love to tell my students is that when I was taken out of the Corps de Ballet to dance with Maria Tallchief, who was already this big ballerina in America, the very first day I went to pardon her, and I was very nervous, and she looked at me and she said, you know, I don't bite. And I said, Miss Tallchief, I'm not worried about you biting me, I'm worried about me pushing you off the point. In which she sort of drew up and said, you're not strong enough to knock me off the point. And it sort of set the framework for our existence. But she realized that she would only look good if I looked good. Mm-hmm. And I was smart enough to know I would only look good if she looked good. So with this two of us working toward the same goal, while other things were rehearsing, Maria and I were over on the sidelines working as hard as if we had been under supervision. Mm-hmm. So she was very good about that. She never once complained about me working with her, maybe making a mistake, and she had to help me out. She was very good about that.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
And she is also an Oklahoman.
An Oklahoman. Oh, yes, I certainly knew her name growing up. Won't you name for us were there 5 famous Oklahoma ballerinas?
Let's see if I can name them. There was Maria Tallchief, Marjorie Tallchief, her sister, Rosella Hightower, Marcella Larkin, and Yvonne Chateau.
Yes, that's
they're
right.
They're all Oklahoma.
I remember the names were legendary when I was growing up.
But I hate to tell you, they're all contemporaries.
Now, you've talked about working in the large companies here, but have you been worked in smaller companies? You said you worked in a nightclub ensemble that probably was contracted by a single choreographer that would job you out to various locations. You were sold as a package show. Have you done other things like that, or even solo recitals or very small programs?
I have done, when I came back from Pittsburgh, I was already approaching, I was about 25, 26 years old, an age where if you hadn't started to become a star by then, the chances are you were not going to be one. And I was going to be a star. Mm-hmm. You know, I never thought of myself being courted about it. So I opened a school in Greenwich Village, and I organized a company called Dance Originals. Again, some of the people that were involved in that have gone on and done other work. And we gave concerts on a regular basis. Dance Originals was really the concept that I would choreograph maybe a couple of ballets, and someone like you would choreograph another couple, and it was a joint effort. And we performed a lot, and finally, like everything else, the money situation was becoming more and more difficult, because the only thing that we could count on was the ticket sale, and that really wasn't enough.
So people weren't salaried by any means. There was no backing for it. It was just what you could collect.
What was wonderful in that at that time, I don't know if it still exists, but it certainly was at that time. I had an acquaintance who was a costumer, and he worked for one of the big costume houses here. And so if we needed a tutu, he would somehow sneak it out, and we would wear it. And I don't want to ever get him into trouble, but we had costumes. And then we had other people, friends of mine, who would build sets for him. And we would have sets and things like that. And he would do this all for free. And the dancers would rehearse for free. I can remember what little money I had paying people's transportation, or paying for their dinner, or having them come to dinner, preparing dinner for them, because it was a little cheaper than having them out. So I did that a lot, you know, to get dancers to work with me.
Sure.
One of the things that I did not know this at the time, and I've only recently found it out because I am now very friendly with this older dancer who is just a couple of years older than I am. But I was coming across a program and I found his name on it, and I was the choreographer and he was one of the dancers, but I didn't relate at the time. And he told me, because I was the choreographer, I wasn't involved in any of the contract disputes, but it was the first equity show that with an equity contract to be produced off Broadway. And as I say, I only recently found that out because he was involved in getting the contract, because usually equity never bothered to check on these small little productions. But they had, and as I say, we were the first off-Broadway musical.
Well, regarding stage work like this, what advice, did you ever come across somebody that was just so difficult to work with as a choreographer, artistic director, maybe the musical conductor, and that you had to really treat with kid gloves? Maybe somebody that I have found in my performance career that people like that are usually a little soft on their own skills, and they take it out on other people to put them on the defensive. Do you have any experiences like this?
I said, I'm not as polite as you. I usually tell them so, and it was not uncommon, and I won't mention the name because he's still around, but I worked for a choreographer I thought was so bad that one day I told him my cat knew more about dancing than he did. And he always managed to put me in the back, and I don't blame him, because I really gave him a hard time, because I just couldn't believe that someone could be in his position and not know more about it. And as I say, I didn't work it very well, because I ended up more in the back than I ever ended up in the front. The only time he was one of the choreographers for Bittersweet, and there were only really two of us, two men, that were very classically trained. And there's a very classical interlude in Bittersweet. And he had, for his own sake, bring me out and put me in the front and star me in the part, which must have killed him. But there was no other choice. And that was, as I say, I wish I had the secret of working with some of these people, because I'm a little outspoken, and I think if you're inadequate, I might tell you so. And
if it just happens to possibly be true.
If it's true, but I tell you, nobody has more respect for a good choreographer, a good director than I do. No one. And whatever they would ask, if they wanted me to crawl on my belly across a 90-foot proscenium, I would do it. But these are, when you ask about difficult choreographers, yes, you come across them all the time. I've had a choreographer say I want you to scoot back, jump in the air, and turn around. And I would say, do you mean jeté en traîneau? I don't know what it's called, just do it.
Oh my.
And of course, this doesn't build a lot of confidence with the choreographer.
No.
And then I had another choreographer say, I want you to pick the girl up and put her down on the other side of the stage, and that would be 16 counts. And so I turned to the girl and I said, well, do an ensemble jeté, and I'll get you. Don't talk about it. What do you people go to dancing school for? And again, you just sort of stare at it because, you know, when you go to dancing school, you don't, the choreography is not presented to you. It's not one set pattern.
Sure, you have a vocabulary.
Yes, and unfortunately, this woman managed to do a lot of choreography, and I never understood how. Because there are some famous choreographers, and I won't mention their names because I don't want to burst anybody's living, but one very famous choreographer used to have them put on the music and have the dancers improvise. And she says, oh, I like that. Everybody watch, do it again. And that was put into the step. I'll tell this story about George Balanchine. He was setting a ballet, and this came from the horse's mouth. He was setting a ballet, and he had a group of girls on one side of the stage and a group of girls on the other side of the stage, and every girl had a different arm movement, and they were supposed to be together. And so one little girl got guts enough to say, pardon me, Mr. B, but what do you want with the arms? And he said, oh, I don't know, let me see. I like that. Everybody will do that. And that was how the arms were set, not some kind of mystic thing that he had stayed up all night working on. So the idea that choreographers sometimes come in with they have an idea of what they want, but they may not have worked it all out. And they work it out as the dancers. They see, and I would do this also. If I saw a performer or a dancer doing something better than I had in my mind, I would have no qualms about saying, hey kids, let's all do that, because it's better than what I had. And I think all good choreographers would do that. I remember recently watching an open interview with Allegra Kent, and they asked her the difference between working for George Balanchine and working with Jerome Robbins. And she said, oh, the difference between night and day. George gave you all the liberties in the world. You know, you did what you thought was right, and then it became set. But Jerome Robbins came in, and he wanted every movement exactly as he prepared it. And she said that was quite a shock to a lot of their nervous systems when they got down there and Jerome Robbins became part of the New York City Ballet. He did not want any of their interpretation. And I tell my students all the time, I said, choreographer's not interested in your opinion. You know, you're there, and I try to explain, and when I try to teach, I want my students to be like a Stradivarius violin, and your choreographer is the violinist. And if that choreographer, whatever he/she wants, you're capable of doing it. And that's the way I train my students.
Well, that brings up a situation, as you discussed about the choreographers, but what happens when you're working with another dancer, that there's there's so many possibilities for antagonism between performers. If there's somebody's capable of doing this and somebody else isn't, or somebody wants to follow the choreographer exactly it is, whereas somebody decides, well, if I just look a little weird here, they'll see me and move me to the front row next time. How do you handle the dancer-to-dancer relationship? Any ideas on that?
I have an experience of what happened when I was doing Finian's Rainbow, and we were doing On That Great Come and Get It Day. The choreographer had us do a double pirouette and then dropped. No, first of all, we were on our knees. We got up, did a double pirouette and dropped to the knees again. And there's one guy who could turn, and he would get up and he would do 4 or 5 turns, and the rest of us would do 2, making him look good and the rest of us looking like we were incapable of doing it. So,
but you were doing what you were doing.
Well, we were doing what the choreographer said, and so we went to the choreographer of the group and said, you know, this is what's happening. Watch the performance now. And so he took this dancer to task and said, you know, you will do double pirouette, or otherwise you're out. So that particular night, we are on the floor, we get up, we rip off 5 or 6 pirouettes, he's already back down on the floor. Dancers can be very stubborn at that time, but that is an incident in that case. I've had dancers who felt one way one night, and if you're partnering somebody, it's very important the timing be correct. If you have to lift her in the air or you have to hold her while she's turning. Sometimes these ballerinas have their own idea, and it can alter from night to night. So you're really out there, winging it because you don't know what is going to happen.
It's a flying object is coming through the air.
Yes, true, and you work very hard at it. I've had experience like that. Again, going to the choreographer and said, no, look, I don't care whether she does 10 pirouettes or whatever she does. I just want it to be consistent, so I know when to lift her. Because right now, I said, I'm going to hurt my back one day trying to lift dead weight. I must tell you, it didn't work. The choreographer could not change her mind. But that sort of thing happens. So you become very bitter toward them. You actually begin to hate them. You begin to plot their murder and things like that. It's not uncommon to have these petty arguments. After all, you're traveling. You travel with them. You get on the train together, you get on the bus, and you get off the bus, and you eat together and what have you, and you're together literally 24 hours a day. So a lot of conflict comes in.